Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we are doing a hot takes video for the 2025 NFL Draft. I forgot about this when I was finishing the last one, and just slipped my mind. So I wanted to make sure we got back to this, because we did get a few comments on here I wanted to talk about, and just take a look through them real quick and give my honest thoughts on it. So we're going to be doing that here. It's, I think, always an interesting thing to do before the draft. Last year, I'll give a shout out to the guy. I don't remember who it was, but someone had come on and said that they thought that Brian Thomas Jr., and this was before the Jaguars drafted him, said that he was going to be better than Malik Neighbors in the NFL. And while I will say they're very much even in my mind, that was a hot take, and it was a take that, at the end of the day, pretty impressive and ended up basically being true, or at least, you know, if you're good enough to be as good as Neighbors, I mean, you're pretty much all the way there. So that was a really big one from last year. Some other ones that didn't come true, but it's always interesting to look back on this as well. So with that said, we're going to jump in. I try to have all these open in different tabs, but my computer started sounding like a jet taking off, so thought that might not work the best. So looking at the first one here, this is from Jack's Jags, and we got a few from him. This was his idea, just to bring this back this year. He says that he thinks the Jaguars could trade down with the Bears to number 10 and get a haul to take T-Mac or Graham. Now, I think this is very much in the cards. I think, to me right now, there's two options for what happens. I think the Jaguars most likely take Ashton Jenty at 5. If they don't, I think a team is moving up with them, and that they are taking not Ashton Jenty. They're taking probably Tedero McMillan. It sounds like Kelvin Banks could be someone they're considering. Graham could fall there. But I also think that so much of the interest has been produced by the media to the point where we really don't have anything concrete to say that Mason Graham has substantial interest from the Jaguars. I would say it's just not the case right now. And so it changes, of course, at 10. You're further down the board if he falls there. I would say, if I had to guess who the pick was, it would probably be Tedero McMillan at number 10 for this team. I could see that being it, and if not, there's a lot of talk now about Kelvin Banks Jr. I think he would be there at number 10. So that would be my guess on this one. Now, going to the next one, this is from Bryce's the GOAT. He's someone I've talked to for a while on here now. He's got 3 theories. We'll go through these a little bit quicker since there's 3 of them. He mentions that the Niners move up in the first for a defensive player. There was some chatter about this. I don't know that happens. I think the best case scenario for the Niners as far as where they would move, and this also goes for the Panthers as well, which is relevant here. He is a Panthers fan. Would be moving up from their picks to number 3 to go for Abdul Carter. Because if you're San Francisco, you're getting an incredible pair of edge rushers if you're doing that. And if you're the Panthers, you're getting an elite prospect at a position that is very weak on that team right now. And so it makes a lot of sense for those teams to consider moving up, because for the 49ers, now we have a huge strength on the defense. We're kind of flipping the tide from having lost a lot of players. We're getting cheaper at our premium positions as well, because now I don't have to go out and spend on a guy there. And you're just back in contention somewhere, putting yourselves back in the conversation with a move like that. Now, for the Panthers, of course, it is just trying to get guys who can be the face of the franchise, which I'm not saying that from perspective of, like, we're so much better here. The Jaguars finished worse than the Panthers, and they have the same problem. I think we have some players that we look at as franchise cornerstones, but we do not have that, like, elite, like, top tier blue chip guy outside of maybe Brian Thomas Jr., who I think will be that, and he has to prove it for another year, I think, before you can definitively say that. But that would be my expectation. Now, Shedeur falling to 20 with the Giants trading up to that pick for him, man, honestly, I'll be completely honest here. I don't know what's going to happen with Shedeur Sanders. I don't think he's going top 10 now. I think it's crazy, personally. While I don't love him, I do like him. And I think that he is a good quarterback prospect for the right team. If you have a good offensive line or you have a plan to get that fixed for him, it's a good quarterback. And so I think it's kind of crazy that he's going to fall as far as he is. My guess would just be to go to the Steelers at 21. Like, that feels like the thing that would make the most sense, but I don't even know if that happens. And at that point, I mean, are we talking about the Cleveland Browns moving up for him? I could almost see that being the case. And if I was Cleveland, that would be the move for me. I would get very aggressive to move up in the first round to pair him with Travis Hunter on the team. That's how you change things in Cleveland and go from the Deshaun Watson era to a new day, right? Whether or not you love Shedeur Sanders, you're at least giving your fans some hope there. I think it's a good investment to get him somewhere around like pick 20. So I would probably say the Browns. And for the Panthers, trading down still adding Jalen Walker, I am going to disagree. I think they're going to take him there. I think if they don't, it just sounds like a lot of teams really like Jalen Walker. And so I don't think you're going to be able to move down and get him at a good value. I think he's just going to get overdrafted. And it doesn't mean he's a bad player. He's just going to go really early for the type of guy that he is. Now, going to our next one, this is from CJ, another guy I talked to a lot on Twitter. It says Trey Harris is wide receiver 2 and will be a high-end number 2 and could be a top 15 wide receiver 1 as his potential. Trey Harris is very interesting because I remember like when I watched him in summer scouting, one thing I really appreciated from him was the level of effort. And that's not something you get from wide receivers all the time in all the facets of the game. It's why we really like, for example, Emeka Egbuka this cycle, because he is a high-effort player in every area of the game, and he's going to help your team out in so many ways. Jack Betch will be another player you name for that. Harris is kind of in that mold as well. He is someone who I think, he's been uber productive, right, with Ole Miss. Like, he's had a good career, and I could see him being a solid wide receiver in the NFL. I think he could be a number 2. I don't know if he's much more than that. And what kind of stopped me with him, it wasn't like clear, massive weaknesses, but it's more so like, how many ways are you impressing me? I mean, there were questions about, I think, the contested catches at points where you didn't see the hands that you wanted to on him at times. Some of that production was just beating the crap out of teams that were nowhere near Ole Miss's caliber at the start of the year, but still nonetheless impressive. And for Trey Harris, you got to ask, like, if he's not going to be able to separate at a high level in the NFL, and he's not going to be a dominant contested catch guy, we'll take a look really quick. Maybe this changed a little bit this year. I'm sure he probably improved his numbers somewhat. But if you can't be either of those things, you could really struggle in the NFL. And so I could see him being someone that's just a solid wide receiver. Like, I think he's a starter in the NFL, but I do not think he is necessarily like a huge game-changing wide receiver. Now, he did get better this year. I will give him credit for that. He did have more contested catches. The hands improved. Had 5 drops, though, still. So that's something a little bit notable. You have more drops than you had last year. Still not a huge problem, but I want to see you have great hands if you're going to be an X wide receiver. That's kind of where I sit there. I don't think he is a bad prospect at all. I think he is a solid, very safe player in regards to what the floor is going to be. I just also don't think he's going to be like a high-level difference maker, as is inferred here. But I could be wrong on that. I mean, I think he's someone who could have an impact in the NFL. Now, next one, Mr. Dolphin, and this is from a week ago. So keep that in mind. At this point, he says, Ashton Jenty is the pick. Really feels that way. And even if Travis Hunter is there, Hunter cannot be great at both positions. It's too hard and physically taxing, and his attitude seems to be too defiant to come to terms with that. So starting with the first part here, I do think Ashton Jenty is the pick. Once again, things could change. The Jaguars could be doing all this to try to move out. I think, personally, my opinion on it is that I think they want to move, but if they're picking there, they're taking Jenty. I think that's just how it's going to end. It's going to be a matter of, is a team going to want to move up with them for Jenty, or are they going to be able to get a trade done to move up for a top player, which would be Travis Hunter. And honestly, as much as I want that to happen, if I'm Cleveland, I'm not even entertaining calls. Like, it's just not a player I would give up. Just my personal opinion. So I think it is going to be Jenty. Now, if the Jaguars could choose between Jenty and Hunter, I mean, it's going to be Hunter every time. Like, I don't think that's really a debate, so I would have to strongly disagree with that part of this, but I think it's fair analysis after they talking about, can he play at both positions and kind of the difficulties of that. It is going to be very physically taxing. I think with Hunter, I could see injury issues happening, but at the same time, it's something where I look at it and say, if you run into that problem, like, unless you have the worst injury of all time and you just kill him the first year, then you adapt, right? Okay, he gets hurt the first year of your rebuild, because this is a rebuild for this team. Then let's go out the next year and figure out a better way to use him, right? You got to be smart about how you're going to utilize him. And there's things he's not going to do for you as much because you want him to be out there on the field all the time. So, for example, I would not be running the ball behind Travis Hunter a bunch. I would not be trying to have him super involved in run defense. Like, on obvious downs where it's going to be a run play, he's probably not going to be on the field for me. So I'm looking for ways to mitigate it a little bit. I'm definitely not using him on special teams to be able to get the most out of him on both sides. But even with that said, if Travis Hunter played, let's just say, wide receiver full-time, still a more valuable player than Ashton Jenty, in my opinion. Mainly because of positional value, but I also think he's a great receiver. Now, the last part, I think the stuff with his attitude, it's fair to note. I also think at the same time, it's been a very frustrating draft process for him because, like, I remember watching the Combine interview, and this is basically every interview he's had. He gets asked the same question every freaking time. It is, if you have to play one position, what are you going to play? He has been asked this question probably 1,000 times, and that's not even, like, a joke. Probably 1,000 times over the last year. He's tired of it, I'm sure, and I'm sure he's just wants to move on from that, and he wants to make it as clear as possible he's going to play both ways. I don't think he's sitting there and saying, I'm not going to play for you if you don't let me play both ways. He's made it clear that whatever the coach wants to do, he'll do. He has at least said that. And so I think it's more so that he's saying, look, I love doing this so much that I would rather just not be playing than not playing both ways. And I don't think it was the best statement. I think it means something maybe a little bit different than what he actually said. But I do think he could have worded that a lot better. And that's probably where I'd leave that. I am a big Travis Hunter fan, to be fair, so my opinion's probably a little biased here. But I think, as far as his attitude, I think he's just very frustrated with this because it just seems like everyone's doing, like, gotcha journalism and trying to, like, catch him say something that leans one way, and then we can have all the reports to say, oh, he wants to be a cornerback, or, oh, he wants to be a wide receiver. I think that's what people desperately want to hear. Now, we got half these left. We got more from Jack's. Got quite a few here. All right, Darius Alexander will be the best deal of the class. I think he could be a really good football player. He is an older guy. That's my one concern. So, how much more development are you going to have? How long is your career going to be? It's going to be shorter than some other people. I also think with this defensive line class, it's very wide open for who could be the best player. And so, is it possible? Yes. But it just kind of speaks to the fact that, like, this is part of the reason why I'm not so big on Mason Graham at 5. And I have not been some huge proponent of that this offseason because I think that the difference between, for example, let's compare him to Ashton Jenty because Jenty is the other player that's been talked about recently. The difference between Mason Graham and your next defensive lineman, which could be Walter Nolan, could be Kenneth Grant, could be Derek Harmon. That gap is so much smaller than the gap between Ashton Jenty and Omarion Hampton. So when people, like, bring up to me, well, why would you take a running back at 5? There's so many in this class. It's like, okay, but everyone's arguing Mason Graham. And it's even worse there because I could get a guy who might be better than him at the end of the first round. I could get someone on day 2 who might be better. Probably not if you're doing it on day 2, but that could be the case. So to me, that's been one of my frustrations with that. And this kind of speaks to that in that you could have a player like Darius Alexander, who's not a unanimous first-round prospect, end up being the best DL. He has those kinds of traits. It's just a very close class. I don't think there's that like elite prospect at the top. There's a lot of really good prospects. Now, Isaac Tesla, I hate it. I can't speak to it. I did not watch him, so I am going to pass on that one. The Jaguars taking Jenty at 5, I agree. And we've discussed that a little bit here. Shedeur could, I think he probably falls to the Steelers. I think the Steelers pass, though, as much as I would not be doing that if I was the Steelers. I'd be popping champagne if he's there at 21. But I do think he will get there. I think he could go past there. And maybe you see a trade, say, with like Minnesota for the Cleveland Browns where they want to move up. That's kind of what I hope happens if they get Hunter. I think that'd be the best thing for them. That would be my guess on Shedeur Sanders as far as like the team that'd probably be the most motivated and where it could happen. But if they really think the Steelers could do it, he might not fall to 21 in that case. It really depends on just what the Browns think. Travis Hunter being one of the biggest busts in NFL history. You know my opinion on that. I completely disagree with it. I think it's kind of crazy how many people genuinely believe he is just a bad football player. I'm not saying that's necessarily the opinion here because this is, a college to NFL transition. Things can change there. But at the end of the day, like with Travis Hunter, I think he is a very safe prospect in the sense that, okay, if it doesn't work both ways, okay, maybe he's just a corner for me. And then he's an incredible corner because we've seen that at the college level. Then you would be projecting an elite prospect to just suck. And that's probably not going to happen. I mean, we're going to be talking about it would be the biggest bust in NFL history, like stay here. Even at wide receiver, like if he didn't develop at all, he's still a very good receiver. So is that the biggest bust in NFL history? I don't think so. I cannot see this being the case. And if it is, there's going to be so many people that are going to have to pretty much rethink everything in life if this kind of thing happens. Now, last opinion here, I do agree with Kevin Winston Jr. being the best safety in this class. I have him as my number one guy. I have him as my number one guy coming into the year. I think he's a damn good football player. He is my guy in this class as well that I hope to be able to put out a video before the draft, and we probably will probably come out tomorrow or Thursday morning, just on my favorite prospects in the class. Kevin Winston Jr. is one of those. He's got awesome size. I mean, some of the best size out of the safeties, not named Nick Emanwari, because how do you compete with that? But he is a fast player as well for that size. I think he's a phenomenal run defender. He does so many things well. The coverage has got to develop a little bit with him, but I would feel very comfortable immediately putting him in as my strong safety, putting him on tight ends and having him play in that kind of role, stopping the run. He's going to be incredible at that from day one. And he's going to be fully recovered from this injury as well going into his season, so I think he'll be available very early. I think he'll make a big impact. I think he's going to be one of those guys that we're going to look back at and say, wow, how the hell did he go in, say, the third round? We'll see where he goes. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes like mid-second or significantly earlier than people thought, just because if so many people are talking about this before and feel like it's going to happen. Sometimes those players just don't fall, right? And that might be the case with Kevin Winston Jr. Now, we got one here from, hopefully I say this right, I'm just going to say Rain. It says, James Gladstone will be the reason we win our first Super Bowl. This very well could be the case. I think he'll be the reason for the Jaguars definitely being a much more competitive team in the future. Now, will that be 2025? I don't know, honestly. I think right now, honest opinion, taking off the teal glasses, which I try not to wear them too much, I think that this team has a lot of average. I do not think there are clear needs, other than like depth, right? I would say edge 3, for example, would be a clear need. But as far as starters, everyone can take the field, right? Like, you're not in a situation where it's do or die at any position. But there are so many areas that I feel like we need to upgrade on this roster. And that's going to take a lot of time. It's not going to be a quick thing. And so I think it could take time to get this roster where Gladstone wants it. But with the patience that Shad Khan has, I think this will be the person that works out for it. I think you give him... Yeah, I mean, he could be competitive this year. Don't get me wrong. We might be a playoff team. But you give him a couple years, maybe 3, I think this roster is going to be in a far better situation. I think this team's going to be run very well. I think we're going to have a good coach in Liam Cohen, and I think we're going to be in the playoffs. And with a division that is, well, maybe it'll get better in the future, but it's been hot garbage for a while. It still is. Don't get tricked by the Texans making the playoffs and winning the wild card round. They are not nearly as good of a team as what they finished last year. But I think you definitely are going to be a playoff contender. And it is a question of Trevor Lawrence at the end of the day, where if you give him enough things to work with around him, you build that Super Bowl caliber roster, which I believe we will eventually accomplish. Will Trevor Lawrence flip the switch and be the guy to win a Super Bowl? And I think I would agree with this. I'm throwing on the teal glasses for that part, I will be honest. But it's just a question of when. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be in this decade. Who knows? You know, I obviously hope it is. I'm watching football for the hope that we're going to go all the way. But realistically, I do think at some point he's going to get us to a Super Bowl and we're going to win. I would say I would believe that, but I could totally understand if that weren't the case for, whatever reason that might be. Could be Trevor, could be other things. Another one from Jags here. I wanted to throw in one more hot take that John Mechie will be traded to the Jaguars during the draft for a 2026 sixth-round pick. See, last year, I would have probably agreed with this. Let me reword that. I would have been fine with this. I can't necessarily agree with a take that's this specific. But I think with John Mechie, I would have loved to have tried to acquire him before. He has not really panned out the way you wanted him to. There's reasons for that. It's very unfortunate with him. I would not put the blame on him for much of it. The guy got cancer the moment he went into the NFL. Really crappy stuff. I think at this point, the more realistic thing would have been for John Mechie to just straight up be a release or a cut at some point, or to just simply run out of his rookie contract, which ends after this year, and then to be on the Jacksonville Jaguars in the future. Now, I don't know how this staff would feel about him. Doug Peterson was the one who was associated to him or affiliated with him before the draft. We at least heard some talk about that when he was in the draft, but we obviously don't have him anymore. So I would sit here and say I would have to disagree. I don't think we would even give up that much to get him. And more realistically, he will probably just be cut at some point, and there's 31 teams that could grab him. We're only one of those, and I can't give you a reason why the Jaguars would be more inclined than other teams. Now, last couple we got here, this is from Uncle B. The first one is that we will trade back with Pittsburgh and still land either Warren or Colston at 20. So I'll kind of split this up into a few things here. I would say I don't think we're trading back with Pittsburgh. I don't think Pittsburgh wants to move up here. They have no second-round pick, and if they were going to do this, it would be because they were sold on a quarterback. And if they were, I don't think they believe they got to trade up to pick number 5. I think they would be looking at, okay, maybe we move up in the teens, right? In a spot where no one's expecting it, so we don't have to wait till our pick and wonder if someone's going to jump us, and then we go get Shedeur Sanders. That would be far more likely than Pittsburgh trading with the Jaguars and spending that much more when I don't think it's really necessary to have to do that. Now, the second part here, Trey Harris, or actually, sorry, I skipped part of this. The other thing I wanted to say, as far as if Warren or Colston would be available at 20, I think Colston Loveland could. Warren will not. I think he's going to go earlier of the two, even though Colston's my tight end at 1. I think with Colston is probably the Colts, which I guess fits. I mean, his name's pretty close to that. But even if it's not the Colts, you could talk about the Seahawks. The Chargers could get aggressive, move up for him. Some different things that could happen there. I think he's the only one that would make sense at 20. And if he was there, that would be a hell of a pick, honestly. I think he is, for me, like 5th or 6th on my board. I think he's an incredible football player. Now, Trey Harris is a better fit for our offense compared to Burden or Igbuka. See, I would disagree. The reason why is because I think of what this team needs and what we have. We have a lot of outside receivers now. The question is, what do we have in the slot? And you'd say probably Parker Washington. You'll rotate guys in. But Washington, to be fair, has played more outside. And I'm not so confident to say he is a definitive starter for this team. He could be, but I would not be against upgrading there. And so I would look at it. Of this whole list, I would say Buga, which I'm assuming you're saying here, would be the one that would make the most sense. Because I think you bring in a player that is going to be obviously a fit in the slot, which is going to be where you're going to have the most reps available. I think he's a very solid wide receiver, very reliable, good route runner, and also someone who can, like Chris Godwin did for Liam Cohen last year while he was healthy, help in the run game. So you get that type of receiver to fit what you're missing and what would work really well with Liam Cohen. Now, Luther Burden could be just the guy who's left there, and I think he's still a better fit than Trey Harris just because of where he lines up. But where I would say Trey Harris might be better is in the blocking department, kind of like I mentioned earlier. I don't think Burden does a whole lot there, and there's some questions just about effort at times, specifically from last year, which, given it was a brutal year for Missouri. But I do think Trey Harris is a better fit in that regard. Still, though, if I was going to pick any of these three players just based off fit, not ranking them on how good they are, it would still be Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, and then Trey Harris for me. Now, final one here. It says our first 7 picks will be DL, wide receiver, DL, OL, RB, tight end, OL. I would have, I mean, if I'm being stupid here, I could just say, I might disagree because it's so specific, but could it be? Let's take it from that perspective. So pick number 5. I would assume you're guessing it's Mason Graham. At this point, it seems like that is just not the case, and it is one of the most overblown things from this offseason, which this was a week ago, so I'm not going to sit here and say you should have known better. I mean, we all thought this a week ago, that this was going to be the case. We were just told it over and over and over again. Now, wide receiver for pick 36, or maybe that's a trade-up. I think that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about on the predictive mock draft. We threw out the idea of could you move up for Emeka Egbuka? We took Jack Betch at pick 36. It could be Luther Burden falling to 36. I think that would make a lot of sense for this team. Defensive line at 65, which is what I would assume would be our next pick, or 70. Pick number 70, I think you could have some good values there. Maybe a player like, say, Alfred Collins falls there, and then you get a really good interior player, gonna stop the run. Just add to the rotation there, which is really what's needed right now. You don't have to go get a world beater at the position. It would be welcome. But you do have 2 players in Eric Armstead, Mason Smith. You could add another one there, but if you had one at pick number 5, yeah, you're not going to probably take another player that quickly there. Offensive line with number 88. It could happen. There's going to be some good values there. I think like Wyatt Milam could be there. You could talk about Miles Frazier, Ozzie Trapilo. Maybe he falls a little bit. That might be his range anyway. Running back, if I guess, 106? I could see that. I think that's right about where it's going to start. There's been a lot of talk about that where people don't really think they're going to go day 2 as much. They think maybe there's like 5 or 6 guys that'll be off the board after the 3rd round. But they're talking about once day 3 opens up, it's going to be a run. And so this would be where it would make sense for the Jaguars. You also have some really good tight end depth with your later 4th round pick. Could see something like that, and then for 5th round, probably can't comment too much because just don't know what players will be there. Maybe like an Emory Jones falls. That would be a really fun pick. I would love to get him if he has that Leonard Taylor type of fall that I've so often referenced for him, but we'll have to see what happens. But yeah, overall, I think some of these make sense. I think some of them are kind of dead, though, right now, just based off what's happened in the last week. So, with that all said, that is what we got here for our hot takes. It was a lot of fun to talk through these. Good conversations. Definitely let me know your thoughts if you agree with my opinions on these, or if you agree maybe with what they said that I maybe didn't think was the case. Just let me know. I'd love to hear it. We're going to wrap this up here, though. So, want to shout out our channel members, Premier Sierra 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, Ichi Wiener, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, Brian Foster, and Frangies. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.